The first question this week comes from Paul, and he asks, why don't I plan to compete? And for me, I the purpose of my kind of physical training at the end of the day is really to just look pretty good. And I think that definitely there's a big cost to competing, and that's probably like a year of your life that you're giving up to. And I don't want to say giving up, like it's not like you are in stage condition that entire year and that things are necessarily bad during that time, but there's probably going to be at least like 2 or 3 months there to where you're not quite kind of normal. And just right now, like that piece of it isn't necessarily like worth it to me. And for some people, like it might not be as much of a downside. Like I think that people that might have a lower body fat settling points and stuff like that, they might be affected less by a prep and stuff like that. But I don't know. For me, it's just like for whatever reason, stepping on stage just doesn't really appeal to me a whole lot. And like, I think that I can get to my goals via training without having that side of it. Now, does that mean that I'm never going to compete and that I won't change my mind in the future? No, I think that I'm always open to, hey, maybe someday I would want to have that competitive side. But right now, like I'm enjoying lifting. I like the way I look, and it's just not worth it for me to go through that kind of digging phase just to say I did it, And I think that sometimes I think that people might decide to get on stage for more kind of external purposes. And I think that if you do and you're okay with that, then that's fine. But for me, it's just not something that is a personal goal of mine at this point. So there's not really a huge, like, crazy reason behind it. It's just like I'm cool with where I'm at. And right now, the cost isn't worth the benefit. So hopefully that answers that. Now, the next question comes from Instagram, and it basically said, like, does higher rep ranges mean you should train closer to failure? And I think that this is true within the context of above like 12 to 15 reps. So when you're going into those higher rep ranges, probably like that 15 to 30 rep range, you're probably going to have to train a little bit closer to failure to make sure that you are training all of your kind of higher threshold motor units and your faster twitch fibers and that sort of thing. So we need some of that fatigue to result in us recruiting like the entire spectrum of muscle fibers. And we don't see that as much with kind of lower rep ranges. And that's potentially just because we have more kind of absolute tension on the bar and we recruit the full spectrum of muscle fibers a little bit earlier on in the set. So we might not need to produce that fatigue and get as close to failure. Now, I would say that it's important to caveat that with above like the 12 to 15 range, because I wouldn't say that like if someone does a set of 7 versus a set of 12, I would say both of those are probably like pretty similar in hypertrophy at the same reps in reserve. So a 2 reps in reserve set of 7 or 8 compared to like 11 or 12, I would say not much of a difference. But if you compared a 2 or 3 rep in reserve set of 8 compared to a 2 or 3 rep in reserve set of 30, for one, on the set of 30, it's tough to know how close to failure you actually are. And if we need to train closer to failure on those higher rep ranges, but it's also harder to tell how close to failure we are, man, you could shoot for a 3 RIR and if you're off by a couple of reps in reserve, you might not get a ton out of that set. But if you err on the side of training close to failure with a higher rep range and that sort of thing, then I think that you'll be fine. All right, so I think it is true that higher rep ranges probably train a little bit closer to failure, so you're recruiting your entire spectrum of motor units, but that's with the caveat of above that kind of 12 to 15 range. All right, next question asks, are there any issues to consider? And this comes from my client, Greg Stone, with the best name in the world. I don't know why I like that name so much. It just sounds like Greg Stone, ready for duty. I don't know. I'm sorry, Greg. But food variety while dieting. So if you eat like the same foods all the time while you're dieting, is that going to be a bad idea? And I think that it depends on what your day-to-day foods look like. Like if it's the same foods kind of day in and day out, but it's a variety of foods, like your meal plan has a variety of fruits, veggies, stuff like that, then I think that you're fine. Now, if it's literally like broccoli and chicken at every single meal, then it's like, hey, let's spice this up a little bit. Maybe that's probably the best option, but then maybe even like a multivitamin. And I think that if there's a case for a multivitamin, it's probably while dieting is probably potentially the most important time, as we're probably lower on total food, so potentially lower on certain nutrients, and preventing deficiencies with a multi might be a better idea while dieting. So I would say I wouldn't worry about it too much if you're eating the majority of your foods, healthy, whole foods, and in your meal plan, you have some variety of fruits and veggies and different foods. But if it is like a chicken salad and an apple at every single meal, then it's probably like, hey, let's get some variety in there. All right? So hope that helps out, Greg. Next question. Favorite foods while dieting and bulking. So I don't know. For me, it's like the same. I really don't change my food choices up a whole lot, regardless of dieting and cutting and that sort of thing. And I mainly stick to whole, nutritious foods and stuff like that. And I tend to have a little bit bigger of an appetite. And a potential reason for this, I think anyways, is that, hey, I do come from an overweight background. And considering that hunger levels and leptin, the hormone that kind of regulates hunger and stuff like that, is largely regulated by body fat cell size, the size of an adipose tissue. My thinking is that, hey, my body might be, or in adolescence, I was a little bit overweight. Maybe I added some fat cells, and maybe if I wanted to have completely like top of the line leptin levels, so I'm not experiencing any increases in appetite and stuff like that, then I might have to put on more fat than I'm comfortable with. So I think that for me, I'm just gonna have to be okay with that trade-off of generally having a little bit bigger of an appetite kind of all the time. And that doesn't mean that like I'm hungry in the off season or when I'm not dieting, stuff like that. Like I'm really not. But I tend to have a larger appetite, and that's potentially one of the reasons. Now, I also get to a point, and I also stay at the point to where I'm not food focused. I'm generally full from meal to meal. It's just that like, hey, when I start eating, I could eat a lot. And I'm sure that, that's just a theory, and it's potentially other factors that go into that for sure. But I tend to eat very similar foods, whole nutritious foods throughout off season and dieting. And my favorite foods are like oats, potatoes. I like apples are solid, strawberries are the best, watermelon's awesome. Like any fruits I really like. During the off season, I still have salad and stuff. Like that's cool with me. I put mustard on my salad because I'm freaking disgusting. I know, but I don't care. And yeah, the only thing that changes when I'm dieting is I just have less oatmeal and I have less potatoes. And I don't know. I just keep it simple that way. And I don't get too caught up in, I like, don't feel like you have to have certain different types of foods while you're bulking and cutting. Because, like, for me, it's just easier from a grocery shopping standpoint, from a meal prep standpoint, to kind of know what foods I'm having all the time and just have those foods. So I keep things pretty basic, pretty the same, and I just kind of increase portion sizes. And those are kind of my go-tos there. All right, so hopefully that helps out. Pretty lame answer. I'm a pretty lame guy. I keep it basic, so it is what it is. Next question. How to maximize muscle while intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting, let's say that someone's eating in a 8-hour window each day and they fast the rest of the time. I would say some considerations. I would place your workout within your feeding window, or else if you do train fasted, make sure to get protein in as soon as you can following your workout. Other than that, probably a good idea to have protein on kind of, if you can, maybe on both ends of that kind of feeding period. So right when that period starts and right at the end of that period, having some nice quality protein and still making sure to hit your daily protein intake in when you are doing that sort of approach. And then if you're doing that and you're working out within that window, I think that on paper, maybe it's still not, optimal, but man, I think that you can still get the majority of your results kind of doing that. And the only thing that I would look out for with intermittent fasting is, like, if you are saving literally all of your calories for one single meal and like you're training fasted and you're not eating much around your workout and you notice your performance is suffering, and it can be kind of easy for that to turn into a restrict then binge kind of mentality of you're just saving all your food for the end of the day and all you're thinking about is that food at the end of the day. And I've done it in the past, and literally while I'm eating that food, I'm thinking, man, each bite, I'm one bite closer to having to wait another day for this big meal, and not a good situation to be in. So I think that you can do intermittent fasting and get the majority of your results. If you have protein on both ends of your feeding window and train within your feeding window, I think you're going to be pretty fine. It's probably not kind of optimal on paper, but I think you can get some solid results. But just make sure it doesn't turn into kind of a restrict and binge kind of sort of deal. All right? So hope that helps. Final questions. What gym do I train at? Because it's empty in there and no one else is in there. So that is my personal home gym. I love it. No, just kidding. I would like a home gym. So one of my hobbies that I like doing is getting on Pinterest and looking at home gyms, because isn't that what every bodybuilder does? But no, that would be sick. It would be awesome someday to be able to have my own home gym, get some nice natural lighting in there, have some nice scenery. Like, I think that would be sick. So someday, hopefully I do have my own, but I work out at a 24-hour fitness. I live in a town of like 5,000 people. So there's not a lot going on. And at 7 in the morning, there's even less going on. So yeah, it works out. There's usually like one other OG in there with me. And yeah, it's good. But anyways, the last question is that my girlfriend in the background or sister? And it's my sister. Okay. Your boy is a single bachelor. And man, those girls out there, I tell you, they are crazy. All right. See you next Sunday.